Успокоюсь. Успокоюсь.
While the war in Ukraine keeps taking more and more lives of Ukrainian soldiers every single day, well, on the West there are still voices who basically wants to keep on feeding this war, pretending that they want to do this because they defend democracy and freedom in the Ukraine. Is that really so? In this video, I want to discuss a recent article wrote by Secretary of Defense of the United States, Lloyd Austin, who basically, as you know, soon will be leaving the office. So he wrote a quite extensive article dedicated to the war in Ukraine, and he mentioned several topics which would be very interesting to discuss and relate them to what's actually going on in Ukraine. His article is called "The Price of Principle is Dwarfed by the Cost of Capitulation in Ukraine." And look what he's writing. "The spirit of Ukraine has inspired the world." Well, it's hard to argue this, especially in the early stages of the war. A lot of people really felt moved and showed so much of the support, financial and moral, putting the flags of Ukraine all over. So this is true, but let's keep on. "It has reminded us all to never take our freedom for granted. We fully understand the moral chasm between aggressor and defender." Well, of course, it's noticeable that Lloyd Austin is trying to talk from the position of obvious moral superiority. That's exactly how he feels himself in comparison with probably Russian politicians. Okay, that I'm not going to discuss that, but a moral chasm between aggressor and defender, you can really say that it's true that Russia was an obvious aggressor in 2022 when they invaded Ukraine. So, in relation to Ukraine, yes, but what about United States of America and its NATO allies before the 2022? Let's say from early 90s. The constant NATO expansion toward the east, toward the borders of Russia, is it not an act of aggression? I just don't know, you tell me. Maybe it's a totally peaceful act or whatever. But imagine if Russia would create a military alliance and start to expand it to the border of United States of America. And at some point they would start like pushing this policy into the Mexico, and maybe even making coup d'etat in Mexico government and saying like, well, Mexico just has the right to decide for themselves. They want to be with us, and you know what? We will put our military bases because we want so, and you have no say, United States of America. Do you think this action wouldn't be perceived by United States of America as an act of aggression? I mean, that's a rhetorical question. So, of course, Russia made an aggressive act against Ukraine. But if we put the things into a context, all of this was preceded by aggressive action by the West. Aggressive acts, because expanding a military alliance, not just some economic zone or whatever, military alliance, which is in the kind of enemy relationship with Russia toward its border, well, you tell me how you would perceive it. So yeah, the moral chasm between aggressor and defender would be probably better understood if we would not look at this problem in an isolated manner as just Russia, without no reason at all, started to be shown as such an aggressive and crazy state attacking Ukraine, because it was preceded by something before. So let's keep on reading. Lloyd Austin says, "We will not be gulled by the frauds and falsehoods of the Kremlin apologists. and we will continue to defend the Ukrainian people's right to live in security and freedom. Look guys, I am all for Ukrainian and everyone else's people's right to live in freedom and security. But just check this out. I'm curious if the Lloyd Austin can explain to this poor guy that what they are doing with Zelensky regime is just defending this guy's right to live in freedom and security. That's why they are taking the freedom and security from him, and probably his life as well. And then he writes, Putin's assault is a warning. It is a sneak preview of a world built by tyrants and thugs, a chaotic, violent world carved into spheres of influence, a world where bullies trample their smaller neighbors. World carved into the spheres of influence obviously is not the idea that Austin likes. He prefers the whole world being just under the influence of one country, the United States, probably. Nice. And bullies trample their smaller neighbors? I don't know about bullies, countries who are entering their noses into the business of smaller and weaker countries. It's only Russia did that, right? I mean, United States would never do something like this, I guess. And the world where aggressors force free people to live in fear. Yeah. What do you think? Which country is an aggressor who forces free people to live in fear? Probably he refers just to Russia, right? I mean, what would you think about this kind of country? It's probably a country who are persecuting people on the streets and maybe kidnapping them without their consent and maybe sending them to the front line with high chances to die or to be left crippled, or at least in the best cases to be left with PTSD. That's what an aggressor country would do. Is this Russia? Oh. Yikes.
Ганьба поліції! Ганьба! Ганьба поліції! Ганьба! Спокою. Ми його затримуємо. Ви що, мужики? Успокойся. Відійди! Ти чого, фонаря?
So I'm wondering, when Austin talks about aggressors that force free people to live in fear, does he think about hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian men that constantly have to live in fear in case if they don't want to go and to fight the war and to risk their life and to probably die, because they are in fear of this governmental machine which are persecuting them and not asking their opinion about what do they want to do with their lives or what they don't want to do. It's just obligatory to go and sacrifice your health, or at least your mental health, no matter what you want. For Zelensky, for the Ukrainian sovereignty, but of course, what kind of independent sovereignty you can talk about if Ukraine is 100% dependent on the West right now? So it's an interesting interpretation of being a sovereign country. Well, the truth is Ukraine probably in the modern context cannot be really independent country. It will fall under the one side or another. That's the harsh truth. I mean, I would love to live in the ideal world, but we are not living in this one. And these guys, they live in constant fear. They are hiding from this state machine which wants them to, well, doesn't want them to die, but want to use them, to use their life, and they don't care about their families, about their health, about their lives finally, because the state interests are higher for them than the lives of each individual. So yeah, it's interesting and very rich from Austin to talk about forcing free people to live in fear. Because I personally know a couple of stories, like from the first or second hands, of guys who living in Ukraine, and they don't go out at all, like even to buy simple things in the grocery for months. For months. Because not everyone is so excited to go and fight in the war, even against this evil Russian, if you want to imagine them this way. Not everyone is ready. Like, people can have their political opinions, but going and actually sacrifice their life, well, especially right now, there is no much people left in Ukraine who are ready to prove their political beliefs with actions. And maybe they don't even have any kind of political beliefs who should win or whatever. They just care about their lives. And rightfully so. They have total right to want to just live. Yeah, as you can see in this video, it's not very rare for the Ukrainian TCK police, military police forces to use violence when they are grabbing and capturing these poor guys from the streets to send them to the military. And precisely about this video, there are rumors in the internet, there were a lot of reports that indeed this guy finally died after this episode. Although a couple of days after, the Ukrainian military representatives, they told to the press that indeed the guy is alive, but I have not seen any proofs of that neither, so I have no idea. And he was in the search, like by criminal search. And do you think why he was in the criminal search? Because he like killed someone or robbed someone? No, because he was, by his age, obligated to go to the mandatory military service, to the front line, to fight, to probably die, and he just didn't want to do this for the interests of Ukrainian government. That was his crime. So when they warned him with something, he didn't react. He resisted to be taken to the police station, and that he was violent toward the police. Well, as you saw, I don't really see. The poor guy just wanted to escape, but he's alive. I don't know, the video you saw yourself, and it can be anything but not an example of democracy and freedom and people living in a safety. So basically, everyone who supports the feeding the war in Ukraine, who supports keeping on sending military aid, funding the war, what they are supporting this. Because this money as well goes to pay to these military guys who are capturing people who don't want. And it's like a lot of people who don't want to go to fight. And a lot of deserters as well. It's like more than 100,000 already, and the real numbers, like, no one really knows. So if you support the war in Ukraine, you support this. And then don't tell anyone that you are pro-democracy and pro-freedom, because it's not what's going on in Ukraine right now. And let's keep on reading the article. So we face a hinge in history. We can continue to stand firm against Putin's aggression. I'm wondering, to stand firm how exactly? To keep on funding the war until there's literally like 0 guys left in Ukraine who are willing to fight? Or we can let Putin have his way and condemn our children and grandchildren to live in a far bloodier and more dangerous world. Well, totally speculative conclusion. that I don't agree with. If Ukraine falls under Putin's boot, all of Europe will fall under Putin's shadow. I mean, and who is the guilty one of that? Few years ago, Putin was disposed to make a deal with these Minsk agreements to leave even the Donbas area under the official control of Ukraine, just granting them more autonomy rights, rights for the Russian language, if the West gives the guarantees that Ukraine is not going to enter the NATO coalition. West didn't want that. West kept pushing. So who will be the guilty one if the West, the Europe, will have this really big PR hit? To tell me. Putin is not just hammering at the norms of the international system built at such terrible cost by the Allies after World War II. He's shoving us all toward a world where might makes right and where empire trumps sovereignty. Like, really? Who is he talking about? And well, I hate to break it for the Austin, because we already live in the world like that. We live in a world where might makes right and where empire trumps sovereignty. Because that's exactly what United States were doing during its decades of the most glorious and powerful times. Because, do you like it or not, that's how our world is functioning. It's not functioning based on a divine justice and the good guys will always win and the bad guys always lose. No, it's functioning exactly based on the power and on the might. And that's what USA was doing during the last, I don't know, like 50 years or so or more. They were establishing their rules, not just the rules-based order, whatever kind of universal rules. It's their rules and their empire were trumping sovereignty of other countries. You just think about Iraq, about Libya, about a lot of other examples. So my sad conclusion is that the policymakers in United States, the ones that are currently in the power, they really don't care about people's lives, and especially about lives of people in Ukraine. All they care, all they try to do is just to bleed the Russia, because yeah, that is partially successful and still not probably to the extent they wanted, because the sanctions didn't work the way they planned, and the military power of Russia just have grown since the start of the war. But that's what they keep on trying to do, to bleed Russia a bit more. Of course they know that Ukraine cannot win, and unless the West enter the war, and probably we all will die because of the nuclear bombing, but I hope they don't want to do that. So yeah, we just keep squeeze Ukraine and Ukrainian people a little bit more to make a little bit more damage to Russia, but that's the only thing they can do. It's super immoral. But they keep on covering this immoral bullshit with words about democracy, freedom. We defend all of these amazing values, which are amazing, but it's not exactly what is going on right now and how Ukraine is living. You cannot defend democracy by sending people to die against their will.